you show up. You know, after practicing the Feldenkrais method, you're highly integrated and you're 100% in. You know, you can't dance and be thinking about your grocery list. And if you do, you trip. And that's true with Aikido or Judo. It's true with many things that are interactive. Because you have to be focusing on your partner and the relationship. And your partner knows when you're not attending.
My interview with Donna Ray focuses on her approach to human development and improved human functioning through the medium of physical movement. Donna Ray specifically teaches and practices a deeply integrative system called the Feldenkrais method. She is the director of Feldenkrais Southern California and has taught in and directed extensive training programs both in the U.S. and in Europe. The Feldenkrais method is an innovative process that utilizes a person's increased awareness of their own physical movements as a vehicle for achieving greater emotional, mental, and physical well-being. The practice teaches us that if one gains more confidence, grace, ease, and freedom in their physical movements and abilities, then that increased mobility will translate directly into more highly attuned emotional and mental experiences as well. The Feldenkrais method is described as for anyone who wants to reconnect with their natural abilities to move, think, and feel. It reawakens us to an area of wellness that is often overlooked, and that is how adeptly and consciously we are moving ourselves physically through our world. A lot of us may be surprised by what we discover once we start bringing our attention to that question. Donna Ray is also a marriage and family therapist whose background in EMDR, interpersonal communication, sexual therapy, voice dialogue, and Ericksonian hypnotherapy gives her the skills to help those she works with to break old habits and to live with greater harmony in their relationships and in their careers. My name is Chess Edwards, and this is Beyond the Noise, conversations at the heart of modern-day living. I interviewed Donna Ray in my home in San Diego, California in September of 2014. Well, hi, Donna.
Hi, Chess.
It's good to have you here.
Thank you.
Yeah. One of the reasons I wanted to interview you was that what you do in working with Feldenkrais absolutely fascinates me. It's just the idea that we can bring our mindfulness to our movement and how that has an impact on our emotional well-being, you know, is admittedly a little bit of a leap that I even have a hard time quite following. So I thought it'd be fascinating to talk today and for you to help us understand, you know, how our awareness of how our body moves can impact us in so many different ways. So where I wanted to start today was, I know that you've been so involved in the Feldenkrais. I mean, I've been watching you, and I've just noticed how immersed you are in that work, and how brilliant you are at it. And so I've got to figure that there's something in your makeup, in your life, that there's a reason why this makes such sense to you. And so I'm curious, if you look back at how you were raised, or the environment in which you were raised, your parents, or anything about your childhood, was there anything there already that you can look back on that was either indicative of this desire to work with body movement or influenced you in any way?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I would say that, looking back, one of the favorite things that I did was dance and move, and I went to gymnastics classes, and fortunately there was a dance studio 6 blocks from my house, so I could ride my bike to the dance studio, and I did that for many, many years. So probably, my experience as a mover and my appreciation for how good it made me feel, although it wasn't a conscious thought, but I was motivated. I rode my bike. I did it myself. My parents didn't take me there. They didn't even suggest it.
Did you have to ride your bike? Like, could they have? Where was this?
This was in Bellflower, the southeast part of Los Angeles County.
Okay.
And they could have, certainly. My mother had a car, but, I was pretty independent as a little kid.
Uh-huh.
And it was safe, and I liked riding my bike, and I was able to go and do that on my own. And I didn't even think about it. It's just like, this is what I'm doing. I love to do this.
And what, if you can remember, if you can bring yourself back to that, what transpired for you? What did dance do for you as a child? How did it impact you?
It made me feel energetic, alive. It was fun. It was a great way to be with my girlfriends, my little girlfriends.
Right.
We got to wear costumes, do little performances. So it was just filled with joy and laughter, and it was in a relaxed environment. So it was so good for me.
Has that maintained throughout your adult life, where you've always really been in tune with your body and the movement of your body, or did you move away from it and come back to that?
I've gone through different periods of time where I've moved away from it, but dance in particular, but then I did Aikido, I did Tai Chi, so I've always been doing something. I've never gone for a long period of time in my life without being engaged in movement.
Right.
And then when I came upon the Feldenkrais method in my mid-20s, the sense of doing these small, gentle movements and the experience of having this incredible state shift of going from lying on the floor to standing after doing these, small movements very mindfully, getting up and just feeling expanded and breathing easy and feeling like I could inhabit myself and my body, but there's actually no sense of body. You kind of lose the separation between your mind, your body, your emotions. So you feel really one with yourself and everything around you.
Sounds like a sense of wholeness.
Wholeness, an integrated self, yes.
And it is that kind of the same. So reaching that state, one might find that through dance, through that type of full body expression and movement. But you're saying you were getting there through micro movement. Just more mindful movement.
Yes, and one of the differences is that we do reach moments of flow and peak experiences through dance, through Tai Chi, and they feel wonderful. One of the differences between that kind of movement and the Feldenkrais method is that Feldenkrais designed these, we call them lessons, and they're like experiments. So you might lie on your back and roll your head to the right and come back to the middle, to the left and come back to the middle, and then go through a variety of movements that include how your shoulders are moving, your hips, your legs, your feet. You go back to the movement of your head, and it's vastly different, and it's so much easier. So you experiment, and it breaks your habits. Because if you don't do something like that, you will roll your head over and over in the same way without ever knowing it.
Sure.
You can't find the option yourself unless you actually, lay on the floor there and really have a sense of what you're doing and how you're doing it. And then you have to come up with experiments and try it another way. And most people just don't do that.
Right.
Why would you examine that kind of thing? Right.
Why would you bring your attention to that type of thing? And I know you have a lot of reasons why.
Yeah.
So I want to get to that. But before we do, let's educate people a little bit more about Feldenkrais, what it is, and where it came from.
Okay. Yeah.
So, Moshe Feldenkrais, am I pronouncing that right?
Yes. Some people say Moshe, some people say Moshe. He spent a lot of time in France. So many people say Moshe Feldenkrais.
And it was probably originally Moshe.
Probably.
Should I say Moshe or Moshe?
Whatever you want to say.
I'm going to go with Moshe, since that's what it probably ended up as.
Okay.
So Moshe Feldenkrais, born in Russia, yes?
That's right.
And then went to Palestine.
Correct.
And then Europe. Spent a lot of time in Europe in his formal education years.
That's right. He went to the Sorbonne and got a degree in physics and one in engineering. And he also met Kano, the originator of judo, and opened the first Western school of judo in France. So he was quite an expert mover. And prior to that, he loved playing soccer, and he also studied self-defense on his own and taught self-defense.
The Feldenkrais method, is that in any way born out of judo, or did judo simply influence him in a way that brought him to the idea of mindful movement?
The development of the Feldenkrais method, I think, was probably a surprise to Feldenkrais. So he was interested in judo, and he had a knee injury from a soccer accident. And so that flared up on him. So he was examining himself and his movements, and he realized that if he would slow down and pay attention to how he was moving and focus on his skeleton, that he could actually make a difference in how he was able to perform while doing judo. So by slowing things down, his nervous system would make corrections that he couldn't make otherwise.
So the original focus, intention, sounds like it was on the physicality.
That's right.
Knee issue, maybe if I can bring more mindfulness, I can relieve this issue because I can bring myself into more bodily alignment.
Right.
But I was looking at some of his comments, and I was fascinated by this one, that he says that what I'm after isn't flexible bodies, but flexible brains. What I'm after is to restore each person to their human dignity.
That's right. And he wanted flexible minds, flexible brains. And he noticed in himself that if he was emotionally distraught, that he would have more pain in his knee. Wow. So he was very interested in that. And he was also interested in auto-hypnosis as a young man. He studied the work of Coué, who was an early French hypnotherapist and also practiced autosuggestion. So Feldenkrais was very tuned in at a young age, looking at how people behave and why they do what they do. And so the self-observations that he made that had to do with his knee injury and self-use while being in judo practice began to develop over time. And then he began to share what he was doing with himself and found that people would respond by introducing a lot of different kinds of movement that wasn't just practicing judo from the classical sense of judo practice.
Did he end up with so here's a man who's bringing together all these different disciplines, and they're starting to come together into a methodology that engages and aligns emotional stability, mental clarity, lack of pain in the body, graceful movement.
Right.
I've got to imagine that at some level he started to also look at this. He must have had a worldview of some nature about how humanity could be, live better through his practices.
Very much so. If you read his books, he writes a lot about how people are influenced by their culture, their family of origins, and how little we're able to make decisions that are our own decisions, that we internalize authority and we act on that internalized authority, and we don't find our own inner authority. And he promoted the idea and the practice that people spend time doing small, gentle movements in this mindful way to reduce their neuromuscular patterns that support those faulty thinking and emotional responses.
Okay, so this methodology, am I correct in seeing it as a vehicle to our emotional stability?
It's emotional stability, but you can't really, you cannot separate emotional stability, your sensations, and your thought processes, and your intentions and your actions. But you can, in the process of practicing the Feldenkrais method, is you can differentiate those processes of yourself by using your attention to monitor and modify yourself. And in that process, you start to increase the integration of all those different aspects of your own way of being yourself. And so he referred to that as changing your self-image. So self-image has to do with what we think we can do and what we think we can't do. And we're often wrong about that.
This is what I love about this, because that's that idea of self-image. If my experience is, if I feel better about myself, if I'm moving with more alacrity, with more confidence, that translates into how I show up in the world.
Immediately translates. Or if you go through a process of making these small movements, and then pretty soon you're doing a bigger movement, and then you're doing something like turning around to look behind yourself or standing on your head, and you didn't even know that was where you were going to be going. You surprise yourself and you say, wow, if I can do that, what can I do that I'm not considering? I mean, it's a pretty incredible experience.
So expanding one's possibilities in one arena expands the possibilities in other arenas.
That's right. And especially if it's through movement, because movement is the primary way that we learn. So think about it. I mean,
tell me more about
infants, small children, everything we do as small children is examined through touch, feel. Kids will go lick a screen because they want to know what it feels like. It looks bizarre.
Right.
But children will do all kinds of things that adults don't do, and sometimes we probably should. But it's all through sensation and movement. And that is formulating our self-image. So as adults, we reduce our experimentation. And we start to believe that we can't do things that we used to be able to do. And we don't challenge the reduction of functionality. And that is certainly a way of looking at aging. A person that's an elder person, we see them as elder because they're not doing the things that a younger person would do. So I've often wanted to create a commercial where you have somebody who's done a lot of Feldenkrais lessons during their lifetime walking down the street and looking at them from behind and then have them turn around and show you that they're 85.
Oh, wow.
You see? Because you don't have to restrict your movement as you grow older. It's not necessary.
What do you see? I mean, I'm really curious about now, with your knowledge and understanding of body movement, when you're wandering out in the world nowadays, what are you seeing in others that either alarms you or concerns you, or what do you notice through your eyes?
As people are growing older, I see that one of the things that people do is that they stop moving their eyes in a differentiated way from their head. So if they're turning, for example, they'll move their feet to turn. They won't begin with the eyes and allow their head to follow and allow the rest of the skeleton to go along with the movement. They'll actually move their feet so that the whole skeleton has to turn in place, for example. The other thing that people do as they're aging is that they start to become worried about falling down. So they look down and they take smaller steps. Well, the fact is, if you take larger strides and you look a little bit ahead of yourself, you probably aren't going to fall down. So if you're more like a movable earthquake building, you're much less likely to fall than if you're holding yourself stiffly and rigidly.
Okay. Yeah.
So people restrict themselves as they're growing older, and it's not necessary. It's a sense of fear of falling. And Feldenkrais said that was the basis of anxiety, the fear of falling, that we sense that in ourselves, we tighten up, and therefore we restrict our movement, and it has a lot to do with this fear of falling.
Sounds like a real vicious cycle. I mean, if I'm fearful of becoming, falling, becoming frail, my self-sense image becomes smaller and becomes frail, which makes me feel even more afraid of getting hurt. When people come to Feldenkrais, do you find, are they primarily coming initially because they have body pains and they don't understand that there's other connections, or are they coming because they have an emotional pain? They recognize that Feldenkrais might address that.
People come to me for a variety of reasons. Many times because they've had an accident, automobile accident, or they've fallen down, or they've twisted their ankle, or they injured their shoulders. So they're motivated because they are experiencing pain and discomfort, and usually they've tried a lot of other things, and finally some friend or relative has said, you really need to go see Donna and have some Feldenkrais lessons. I also work with people that have been diagnosed with Parkinson's or MS. I work with people with cerebral palsy, infants and adults. So people find the method, even though it's relatively obscure, by hearing about it and coming in to experiment. And they always feel better after a lesson.
What are the surprises you witness? Like the connections that people make that just kind of blow their minds.
Well, the other day, a woman got off the table and she started walking around and she said, I feel like I don't even have a body. She said, is this what people usually feel like? She said, it's like as if the envelope has been removed and I feel like I am nature. I'm part of nature. And I said, that actually happens to people frequently because all of the tension is removed from the muscles and you have an even sense of muscle tone throughout yourself and you feel like you could do anything you want to do. So even with an injury, people feel hopeful, their anxiety decreases, depression decreases, because they feel like they can actually do what they want to do again.
So we've been talking about how our physical limits certainly translate into our sense of perception of self that is limiting. What about the other way around, in that can my emotional trauma, for instance, translate into physical pain in my body?
We have a lot of research now in the neuroscience field, medical research that shows us that, in fact, trauma does filter directly into physical pain. So even the part of the brain that registers physical and emotional trauma is the same. There's a recent study that I read that showed that women that are abused, as it was about women, but it probably is true for men too, that experience physical and emotional abuse as children, begin to have different kinds of physical pain having to do like with fibromyalgia, say it one more time, fibromyalgia, that's right, and other inflammatory type disorders in their 40s, unless they do something that will help reduce the cortisol level in their body.
Okay.
So they need to do something to reverse the trauma. And for ordinary people that are aging, some of those types of maladies start showing up much later, like in their 60s. So we may think that we're okay, that we've had difficulties, emotional or physical trauma as children, and we go through our life and we ignore them, but we're not really addressing the toll that it took on us and how it continues to wear on us. So it may show up in the form of anxiety or insomnia, or it may show up in interpersonal relationships, difficulties in having attachment and bonding in relationships. So the events that take place in our lives stay with us in some way unless we do something to take care of ourselves and reduce our stress. And the Feldenkrais method works very well in that way.
So internally reliving a trauma is going to keep releasing the cortisol, keep releasing the different...
Yeah, and it's not even necessarily that we're reliving it. It can be, I think, much more subtle than that. When we live in stress, we metabolize and we form neuromuscular states. And those states perpetuate certain kinds of biochemical responses. But they can be interrupted through gentle movement. So you can actually change the way that you're processing information and energy flow in your body, in your mind, your emotional system, by doing very gentle, self-observing movements.
Is it hard so I'm a guy, right? My way of being in the world has always been that if anything's going to have an impact, it's got to be strenuous. It has to be big. It has to be a big movement, a big change and the Feldenkrais method is clearly very much about the subtlety.
It's about the subtlety, and we completely challenge this idea of no pain, no gain. It's not part of the Feldenkrais method. Instead, you start slowly and gently, and then you work up to fast, large movements. But you begin slow so that you can train yourself to be efficient, so that when you're going very fast and you're exerting yourself, that you're not going to injure yourself. So you become more efficient. You have more stamina, and you're much less likely to injure yourself. And this is what Feldenkrais saw in his judo practice. When he slowed everything down, And he taught people how to do the floor work and then go from slow to fast, that they were able to excel much, much better and do more than they thought they could do.
What does so one who is practicing the Feldenkrais method, how is their day different? How are they moving through the day? What types of ways would you be able to look at and you say, oh yeah, that person's really tuned in to Feldenkrais and that person isn't?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. After just a few lessons, people come back to me and they say, this is so surprising. It just sneaks into my daily life. Like, instead of lying on the sofa with my head sort of in a funny position watching the television, I notice and I adjust myself and I make sure that I'm comfortable. When I get in the car, I adjust my seat so that I can sit upright and breathe and turn my head. But I'm doing these things because I do them, not because I think I should do them. It's because I sense myself and I know it's good for me. And that's a completely different approach to oneself.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? It's like from the inside out.
Which makes me think that you're bringing mindfulness to the person that helps them be mindful of their body, but then their body helps them be mindful of their life.
That's right. And we actually attempt not to even use the word body. So I teach seminars, day long, up to 20 days in a row. And I will go through the whole 20 days and I never use the word body.
That's amazing.
Isn't that?
Tell me, how is that possible?
Well, for example, I'll say, bring your arms down along yourself. Someone else would say, bring your arms down along your body. But feel the difference. When I say body, you all of a sudden look at yourself from an external point of view. It's your body. But if I say, bring your arms down along yourself, isn't that a different experience?
It feels more integral.
Yeah, it's like yourself. So we refer to the self.
Yeah, as soon as you call out your body, my body is now a separate thing from everything else somehow.
That's right. And so that promotes this dualistic sense of oneself, body and mind. But if you change your body, you change your mind. If you change your mind, you change your body. So we just talk to you.
Because the Feldenkrais method focuses on the relationship between movement and thought, increased mental awareness and creativity accompany physical improvements. Everyone from athletes and artists to administrators and attorneys, children and seniors are finding great benefit from the Feldenkrais method. Donna Ray is a highly experienced teacher and trainer known for her ability to make connections in her teaching between abstract ideas about life and living and the concrete reality of a daily practice of physical movement awareness.
This is, so you do 20-day courses?
I do.
With the same students over 20
With
days?
the same students. And those students usually want to become Feldenkrais practitioners.
Okay. And what are some of the biggest transformations you've witnessed?
Gosh, so many things happen with people. Frequently, students in Feldenkrais training programs find their passion. So people will go through the training. One of my students became a professional singer, and it's something she had always wanted to do, and she never thought she was good enough. And by practicing the Feldenkrais method, she found the joy of singing again, and the practice of the method improved her capability as a singer, and her self-image changed so that she wanted to be on stage and she wanted to sing, so she did it.
I'm loving this. I'm loving the idea that through awareness of movement, I almost said body awareness. Thank you.
We're all learning.
So through the awareness of movement, that sense of self-image becomes so much more aligned with how I move through the world. Emotionally, how I move through the world, how I show up in the world, my confidence, my stature. Was there anything for you, Donna, that made your love of this work really click, really fall into place? You said you discovered it in your 20s.
I did.
Was it an immediate love affair, or did it take a little bit?
It was immediate. I took a 3-hour course, and during that course, I found everything to be so easy. You know, we started with a simple movement of lifting our head, and then at the end of the lesson, my head it felt like I was lifting a feather instead of a bowling ball. And I thought, how could that possibly be? How am I making my life more difficult than it needs to be? So I just started asking questions immediately. It's like, wow, this is amazing. And the other thing that I loved about it was that the instructor talked about the learning how to learn through movement.
Yes.
And that was always perplexing to me. I'm numerically dyslexic. I had difficulty in school. And I went to my professors in college more than once and said, how am I supposed to learn this material? And no one ever answered my question. So in my first 3-hour, introduction to the Feldenkrais method, the instructor was talking about how you learn and all these learning strategies and how we have actually been experiencing those as children in movement, but we don't stop and think about the strategies that we have discovered for ourselves, even though we're doing them without awareness.
Right.
And so there are just so many things. Intellectually, I was completely, intrigued. And then the sensation that I had of my well-being after the 3-hour seminar was so startling that I said, I want this. How do I learn this? Where do I sign up?
And what changed?
Well, I noticed that I was standing tall without any effort. My breathing was completely expansive, but there wasn't any sense of holding myself in or back or being tight in any way. I was completely there. And prior to that moment, I don't think I'd ever felt like that in my life that I could recall. And I had already had, I experienced massage, bioenergetics, all different kinds of approaches because I was studying psychology and, I'm also a psychotherapist. So I was exploring a lot of different avenues of personal growth and change, and nothing brought me to that state of ease so quickly as the Feldenkrais method.
It's astounding to me that even I, working as a coach, if I'm working with somebody around confidence, I'm typically going after the emotional state of being and how to show up and what shadow aspects of self to be aware of and what aspects of true identity to be aware of. But I love the fact that you're using I'm so hesitant to use the word body now, but you're using the body to help bring people into that sense of feeling. Do you find that that's one of the hardest things for people to tap into, is a sense of how they feel in the world, their body?
I think that, it really varies. Some people can easily tap into their emotional state. Some people, if you say, what is the sensation in your belly or your chest, they can go right there and they can explain it to you, but they can't say what emotion that is. A lot of people have a vague sense of sensation and emotion coupled, and they tell you what they think about it.
Yes.
So by practicing the Feldenkrais method, you start to make those distinctions between sensation, emotions, and feelings. And we now know that emotional states actually, there is a sensation that's very predictable in your body. It's a sensation, a physical sensation when you're having an emotion. And there was a recent study done about this that I can get back to you with if you'd like. But actually the researcher has pictures so that you can see where there's a heat in the body with certain emotions. Maybe you've seen that before. So if you're in love, from your genitals up to your head lights up. If you're feeling anxiety, you feel that mostly in your chest and sometimes a little bit in your throat. So all different. So we always have sensation and emotion taking place at the same time. But now we have documentation that the sensations are equally as important and inform us so that we know how to think and feel and respond to something more fully. So from that point of view, sometimes we talk about people and we say, oh, that person's like a talking head.
Yes.
joking around.
Yeah.
And you can see that people make their decisions based on their intellect alone. And part of our jobs as coaches, psychotherapists, and even in the Feldenkrais method is that we want people to embody their experience.
Yes.
So by doing gentle movement and really developing your self-awareness, you start to sense, feel, and act based on everything that's happening with you. So you're better informed.
This is such good work. So in one of your articles, you said you will learn how your mind, brain, and body work together. And I'm wondering if you can explain the differentiation between mind and brain.
Well, one of the ways that I look at it is that we have this brain in our skull, but the brain is actually brain/nervous system because the whole body's involved with the brain. It's not just in the skull. So that's the first clarification that we need to make. And it's not an easy one for people because when you say brain, what do you point to? Your head.
Yeah.
You don't point to your heart or your gut, but your brain is informing your whole self.
Mm-hmm.
So we're having sensations and emotions taking place because of the stimulation from the environment and our reaction to it. So then we have a mind that's processing information and energy flow. And we can use our mind to influence the brain.
Yeah.
So you can decide you can say certain things to yourself that affect your brain, your body, right? Your neurophysiology.
Right.
So we know that cognitive psychology works. So we can change the way that we talk to ourselves, the way we speak to other people, and that changes all of these neurophysiological processes.
So the mind is the one that comes up with the stories. The brain doesn't. The brain is simply the physical mechanics of it.
Yeah, the brain is the neural firing patterns.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we change those? So we want to affect the mind, and we want the mind to affect the brain, or we want to affect the brain and have the brain affect the mind.
Mm-hmm.
So they're informing. It's recursive, and we can make a distinction, I believe, between those two aspects of ourselves. And sometimes it works better to go straight to the neurophysiology, to the brain, and sometimes it's better to look at the mind and what's happening interpersonally. And that's why we need coaches, psychotherapists, and Feldenkrais teachers,
Right.
because the relationship changes our mind, and it changes our neural pathways. And we know that now.
I've always been fascinated by the idea that the body, I guess the brain as well in this case, doesn't know the difference between fantasy and reality. So if I'm making up a story, if I'm thinking about something which may happen in 10 minutes and I'm fearful about it, my brain is doing all the fearful things around or reacting to the fear, even though it's not real, even though the event isn't happening.
Right. Well, studies show us that the prefrontal cortex actually it grows. The insula actually becomes more dense when you practice mindfulness. So, in the prefrontal cortex it's the part of the brain that allows us to be self-observing. So that's very interesting. I mean, we can actually see from brain scans that there's a difference in our physiology from practicing mindfulness. So mindful movement is part of that practice. It's very much like meditation. We work with breath, scanning, stillness, self-observation, and we add a variety of movements that change the neurophysiology along the way.
Is this then a practice that continues? So one works with you or takes a class and workshop. Is there a daily practice?
Yes, we have awareness through movement as our daily practice, and people use the Feldenkrais method however they wish. So that's one of the first questions that people ask me is, how long do I have to do this? When am I going to feel a difference?
Right.
You'll feel a difference the very first time you have a lesson. You're going to feel improvements. And like other things, you often have to continue to work with yourself to create a long-lasting change. Now, it's also very common that someone will come in with a neck pain or a shoulder pain. They have one hands-on lesson. We call those functional integration, and the pain goes away and it never comes back. But for other people, they have something that's long-term, that's chronic, and they'll have to work with themselves for a longer period of time. Or in my case, I've been practicing Feldenkrais work for 30 years, and life itself presents challenges. So car accidents, having babies, recovering from, turning an ankle or twisting a wrist. Now I'm tango dancing, so I love to do a Feldenkrais lesson and then go dance because my dancing is so much better. It's
that's
always
fascinating.
better. So last night I was dancing and my partner said, "How long have you been dancing?" And I said, 2 years. And he goes, "Wow, it feels like you've been dancing much longer than that." And I said, "No, just 2 years." And I thought to myself, the Feldenkrais method.
Sure, your awareness.
Yeah, sensitivity and awareness of movement.
And not just what your body is doing, but your emotional connection to the dance.
That's true. You show up. When after practicing the Feldenkrais method, you're highly integrated and you're 100% in. You can't dance and be thinking about your grocery list. And if you do, you trip. So that's one of the reasons I love dancing. And that's true with Aikido or Judo. It's true with many things that are interactive. Because you have to be focusing on your partner and the relationship. And your partner knows when you're not attending.
Yes. I want to go back to the learning how to learn. What would be, do you work with children?
Yes, I love working with children.
I would imagine. I mean, how are they learning how to learn? What's the difference that they are experiencing compared to a child who's not exposed to this method?
Well, many of the children that I work with they're atypical in some way. So the children often have cerebral palsy, or they have some kind of delay in learning, or they have a genetic, diagnosis. And so they're having some difficulty in life. So with the Feldenkrais method, we support them and we go through variations of movements that they can't initiate. And so it might be even putting the hand in a position so they can lean on their hand and sense that their skeleton will catch them if they start to fall. Or bringing the knees under the belly, getting them ready for crawling, that they're not able to do that themselves. This is a really incredible example, actually. I worked with a boy recently. I was in Germany, and he was a typical child, but his parents were very, I would say, overprotective. They did not put him on the floor. So they kept him in his stroller and his car seat. They held him. They were very loving parents, but they treated him delicately. So in one lesson, he was a year old, and he wasn't crawling. He was starting to roll. He was very engaged. He loved the movement. And I was able to move him in all these different ways and bring his knees under him and suggest to him that he could crawl. And the next day, I met the mother on the path, just in town. And she said to me, he brought his knees under his chest already. He's already starting to explore crawling. How could that be after just one movement lesson with you? And I said, because he just needed a hint, so now leave him on the floor, let him explore, because kids are going to explore if you allow them to. But many kids these days, they don't spend time on the floor. They're always confined. And then they go from confinement in a car seat to sitting in a chair for several hours in a day in preschool and kindergarten.
So what happens to us when we it sounds like you helped to introduce him to his natural state of being.
Exactly, and that's exactly what I was trying to say. And so with a child, like a typical child like that, he just needed to be shown a little bit, and he just ran with it. And that often happens with other children who, that are more challenged, but they just need a little help. They need some assistance. And the way that we do that is that we join with their movement. So they never feel like something is being done to them. They don't feel like they're being treated. It feels like play, joy. Therefore, they love it. Some of them say it's my Donna Day. They want to come in and play with me. And they leave feeling better, and they're able to do more.
Well, there's so much research out now about play, about the value that there is in play. And so allowing somebody to have more awareness of their movement so that they can play with more, alacrity and grace and flexibility.
Yes.
Opens up so much.
And stability and confidence. Yeah, all those. So the emotions do come in, like you're saying. It's like, if you know that if you're a little kid and you're sitting, and if you start to fall over, that you can put your hand down and catch yourself.
Right.
You're going to feel a lot more capable.
Yes.
You see? So you give them tools that they can use that are functional and immediately used. And that's something that's very important about the Feldenkrais method, is that the lessons create functional action. So the information is used immediately without you thinking about it.
An example, or another example. Let's say an adult example. The information is used immediately. In what ways?
Okay, I'll give you something that many people have difficulty with. So especially people as they become elderly, they'll sit on the pot and they want to get up and they have a difficult time getting off the pot. Or the people will sit on a sofa, and to get up they start to push the sofa. You've probably seen this before.
Yeah, right.
They don't know how to get up, so they push to get up.
Push down with their hands.
They push down with their hands, and then they start to go up, but they go up toward the ceiling. You can't get up if your head's going toward the ceiling.
No, you really can't.
You can't. But so what you really have to do is you have to lean forward, and you bring your head forward until you're over your feet, and then you stand up.
Oh,
but
sure.
people are afraid to do that because when they think of leaning forward, they think of falling down.
Yeah.
But in fact, you can't get up if you don't lean forward. So when I show somebody that one time, they never forget it. They never go back to pushing themselves up again.
You're helping people take risks.
Yeah, it's true.
I mean, that sense of that's like a life metaphor, right? If I lean forward, if I really lean into this thing, I might fall.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and people have to lean into it.
Yes.
Or they won't move. They can't get up. They can't get off the pot.
How would the world be different? Can you imagine a world where the majority of people were practicing awareness of movement and were more aware of their movements? How would communities, societies, families, how would we look different?
We would behave much more harmoniously. After practicing the Feldenkrais method, you have a sense of ease and calmness in yourself. You're in touch with your passion. You have a sense of self-respect and respect of other people. There's, within the method, because of the way we ask question and inquire about our own behavior and the behavior of others, we seek information. So traditionally, for example, in even psychology and in the medical model, people are diagnosed and they're put into a box. And then you think you know the person because they're a this or a that. And even sometimes in physical therapy, people will say to each other, oh, I have a shoulder coming in next. I mean, it's just common language. I have a back coming in next, because they're going to treat their back or treat the shoulder. So we don't do that. We get to know each person individually, and we keep inquiring. And through the inquiry, people become more aware of themselves and how they do what they do. So we're generating respect and understanding all the time.
For self and others.
For self and others. And therefore, you can't objectify people. So if someone, doesn't look the same as you do, you can't put them in a box. You don't just say they're a this or they're a that. You get to know that person. And you can't, I mean, if you're truly interested in somebody, you don't want to hurt them. Because we really are kind, caring, loving beings. I believe that of all people. But we have so many conflicts that sometimes we can't get in touch with ourselves. And I think that even war is based on this inability to step into the shoes of another. And that's what we teach fundamentally in the Feldenkrais method, is like, what would it be like to be that person? And when people are having challenges, we never blame them. We think, wow, they have adapted and their strategies are amazing. Look at what they've done for themselves, given where they've come from, or given, whatever atypical, situation that they're dealing with.
So we're really choosing where to focus. Do we want to focus on the differences and the problems, or on the humanity and the wholeness?
The humanity, the wholeness, and even the learning strategies, or the functionality of someone who is walking, with one leg, and they're using crutches. Like, how do they do that? How do they get around that way? And you admire and respect them for that. You don't think that they're less of a person. Instead, we go in the other direction completely. It's like, wow, look at that person. They're amazing. You see what I mean?
Absolutely.
And it makes people feel so good about themselves,
Right.
And it goes back and forth. I feel good, they feel good. We don't even assess. We don't assess and we don't diagnose. We join with a person, experience what we're experiencing with them, and we take them in another direction very gently so that they can find another way of doing what they're doing.
What are the qualities that when you meet people, when you encounter people, what are the qualities that you bring? Sounds like curiosity is one of them.
Curiosity,
what
definitely.
else?
Well, curiosity and connection, and again, looking for functionality. What's going to be useful for this person? So sometimes the person will come in and say, I can't play baseball anymore. I really want to play baseball again. And I listen to that, and then I see them moving, and then I have to make a decision about what I'm going to focus on. So they may want to be able to throw the ball, but I see that they actually need to connect the movement of their arm to their pelvis, because the pelvis generates all movement because it's the center of gravity. So the lesson will be organized around stability and movement of the pelvis and how that relates to pitching the ball.
Right.
But I don't say that to them. I just know that. And when they get up, they feel this incredible difference. They go to throw the ball, or if it's golfing, swing the golf club, and they go, that was so much easier. What did you do?
It's like, well, I met you with curiosity and love and compassion, and you see their possibility.
And I see
you
the
don't see the lack.
I never see the lack. I always see the possibility.
Yeah, I think we'd all be better off as a society if we were doing more of that.
Yeah, there's no hierarchy. Like, I don't say I'm the expert. I mean, certainly I have information that you don't have because I've been practicing this method for 30 years. But I'm not better than you, and I'm not an expert in that. I don't talk down to you. I don't. What I do instead is I join with you, and you discover with me, and then you have it. So it's yours. Do you see what I mean?
Absolutely.
It's hard to put into words somewhat, but...
Yeah, well, it's the give a man a fish or teach a man to fish concept.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. Yeah, that's a wonderful metaphor.
So you had said that the Feldenkrais method emphasizes the importance of non-goal orientation.
Yes.
In order to increase awareness and thereby improve physical functioning. And that struck me because I find in my work that's such a sticking point, is when the orientation is on the goal and not on the process or being with where one actually is now. And I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit more to that and how it applies with Feldenkrais.
Sure. Anytime we have our focus set on a goal or the end result, we want to skip to that point. So even when we're studying for a test, when we're in school, all we think about is learning what we have to learn so that we can do a good job on the test and get a high score. And oftentimes we forget the material as soon as we've taken the test. It's not information that we were interested to learn, and we didn't bring our curiosity to the learning. So when we focus on the process of the how of learning, or how we're doing what we're doing, then we're immersed in the details. And we start to discover minute details that are fascinating in everything that we're doing. And that keeps us in the moment. And by doing that, we wind up doing whatever it is we were going to do. Maybe you're going to go for a swim, or you're going to, hula hoop, whatever it is. But by the time you get there, you're doing it and you're going, wow, this is so easy. But it's not because you kept thinking, how am I going to hula hoop? Or how am I going to swim better? Or how am I going to play the guitar better, for that matter? Mm-hmm. Instead, you're focusing on your sensations, your movements, your feelings, and how those things are connecting. So in the process of learning, we differentiate, then we link those differentiated parts.
And describe differentiate.
Okay, so even this example that I gave earlier is like you can begin a movement of turning your head with your eyes. You can move your eyes to the right and back to the middle, and to the right and back to the middle, and keep your head still. Mm-hmm. And then you can turn your eyes and let your head follow and come back to the middle. Mm-hmm. And then you just do the movement and it feels easier and you can actually go farther. So differentiation, linkage, and integration. So the integration is when all of the parts are moving harmoniously together. Mm-hmm. So that could be skeletal parts. It's the neuromuscular patterns. Mm-hmm. It's the sensations, the emotions, the thinking, and then intention and actions. So we keep differentiating, linking, and integrating over and over and over again. And all these different systems, because we're a dynamic system.
Yeah.
So you can change, in a dynamic system, you can change one part and everything will change and improve. So that's why differentiation is so important.
I can just imagine, I'm kind of running through my day in my mind, mm-hmm. and I'm imagining all the different opportunities I have to be more aware of. Mm-hmm. I bring my awareness to my relationships with others. I bring my awareness to my relationship to my emotional being. Mm-hmm. And I bring a lot of mindfulness to my life, but all the different opportunities that I have to sit different, to move my head differently, to mm-hmm. walk differently. I can imagine walking into a meeting mm-hmm. and being nervous about it and simply changing the physiology of how I align, and that's going to change my self-image.
It will, and it'll change your performance in the meeting. And there are like you said, there are so many opportunities. I do a fair amount of traveling, so I'm sitting on the airplane and I'm making myself comfortable. And when I get off the airplane, I feel good. Many people feel terrible after flying, and I make those transitions very smoothly because I pay attention to how I'm sitting, how I'm breathing, what adjustments I need to make sure that that I'm not in a position that's going to be harmful for me over time. Mm-hmm. Or when I'm waiting for my luggage, I'm standing there and I'm turning and I'm shifting my weight and I'm looking here and looking there, and I feel really good. And other people are slumping and complaining and feeling miserable. I'm like, okay, and what can I do with my ribs? And maybe I'll reach up and turn mm-hmm. and, just right. I organize myself. That's what we say. We're self-organized.
Mm. This would be wonderful if children were growing up with this increased sense of awareness. Mm-hmm. I just imagine a society where everyone's really a lot more flexible emotionally, physically, mentally mm-hmm. as well.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to teach in classrooms. I have 2 children in their 20s now, and I started teaching in their preschool and throughout their elementary school years. And recently we had a gathering at the house, and a group of girls were sitting together, and they said, I remember you. You're the one that used to bring the skeleton in. You came into our kindergarten class. And the other one said, no, you came into our 2nd grade class. And they all said, I don't remember anything about school, but the skeleton and you teaching us about movement. Isn't that remarkable?
It is.
I was really blown away. And they said, what was it that you were teaching us? I remember doing the movements and touching the skeleton, and sometimes I had them touch each other's spine and notice their breathing. And so I was teaching science through movement. And they didn't remember the name of it. Feldenkrais is sometimes a difficult thing to remember, but they remembered the experience of becoming self-aware through movement.
And that's what stuck with them.
And one of them said, in the kindergarten class, when she stood up and she said, I feel as tall as a teenager.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So, a couple last questions. When you have been working with a group for a number of days, what's one of the things that you say to them as the class wraps and they're going on their way? What's one of the things you want to remind them of? That's basically saying, look, if you took nothing else away, here's what I want you to really remember.
Yeah, that's a good question. One of the things that I say to people after having been with them for several days or 10, 20 days is that when you go home, you're going to feel really different. And the people around you are going to expect you to be the same. So notice what that's like for you, because you've established new patterns of movement, sensing, feeling, and thinking, and even relating, being here within this group. And you're going to go home and everybody's going to expect you to be the same. So go slowly, take a breath, notice your responses and see if you can bring people along and introduce them to the new you, because you're not the same anymore. And it's possible that if people don't pay attention, they could fall back into the old patterns, because those patterns are long-standing. So we need to pay attention, use our awareness to cultivate and to inhabit the new patterns so that they become our trait. Because they will become the new trait, but it does take some time to practice being in that state for the new trait to be the dominant behavior.
Sounds like you're sending out a lot of really good ambassadors.
Yeah, I love to think of it that way. Yeah. Yes, and all those people in the training programs all over the world are going to go speak to people like we're, sharing today. And I really believe the Feldenkrais method can make the world a better place.
Yeah, they're showing up differently.
We all show up differently.
And we know that when people show up in our world and there's something about them that's different, that they hold themselves differently, we pick up on that. It makes a difference.
Yeah, and you feel the genuine sense of a person when they're fully present. You can sense it, and there's a sense of trust in that person. And you can also see the integration, the integrity, and there's a spontaneous quality in people that are well integrated and self-aware.
Beautiful. Okay, last question. What's one of your favorite words these days? That when you hear it or you think of it, you say, oh yeah, that's kind of what it's all about for you, perhaps.
I would say the word integration. It's a new word to many people. It's being used so much more frequently. When I'm listening to colleagues speaking about psychotherapy practice, when we go now to medical establishments, they have integrated medicine. So people are using the word. I'm not sure that people understand what it means.
What does it mean to you?
It's that we're using all of our parts in a harmonious way. That we're addressing all the different facets of humanity. And we keep cultivating the use of ourselves so that we can function at higher and higher levels of integration. So I don't think society as a whole has embraced the depth of that word. And I think it's coming.
Thank you, Donna.
You're welcome. Thank you, Jess.
It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you. For me too. Thank you.
To learn more about or work with Donna Ray and the Feldenkrais method, you can visit donnaray.com. That's DONNARAY.com. There you will find more information about interactive courses and be able to contact Donna Ray directly. I can be reached at chessedwards.com for executive coaching, team development training, one-on-one personal coaching, or to attend an optimal living workshop or international travel program. More episodes of this podcast can be found on iTunes or at beyondthenoisepodcast.com. I'm Ches Edwards, and this is Beyond the Noise, conversations at the heart of modern-day living.